Let's sit in a comfortable meditation posture and close the eyes. The attention on the silence. Silence that always exists deep in the mind. Connect with that silence. Dive deep into the silence and become the silence. You are the silent witness. Now listen to Yoga Vashishta today, Book 4, Chapter 47, continuing with verse 64. The unwise consider the world as eternal from the continued uniformity of its course. But the effect of the everlasting error raises the false suppositions of the world. It is their theory of repeated reincarnations. They cannot say anything otherwise, but must conclude the world as such in order to keep pace with their doctrine. But it is to be wondered if they see the constant, perishable nature of all things all around, why do they not consider the world to be destructible? So others, the Sankhya's, seeing the continuous course of the sun and moon and the stability of mountains and seas all about, conclude from these false analogies that the world is indestructible. There can be nothing whatever that does not reside in the wide expanse of the divine mind, the silent witness. But as these are only the conceptions of the mind, they can never have any visible or separate form of existence. All these appear in repetition, and also repeated is the course of our births and deaths, as those of pain and pleasure follow one another, and our rest and actions following each other forevermore. The same vacuum and these quarters of the sky, with all these seas and mountains, appear in the recurrent course of creation with their various colors. Like sunshine seen through the chink of a wall. Gods and demigods appear again and again, and all people come and depart by turns. Bondage and liberation are ever recurrent, and Indras and Somas ever reappear to view. The god Narayana and the demigods appear by turns, and the sky is always revolving with the reagents of all its sides. The sun and moon, clouds and winds. Heaven and earth appear again like a lotus flower, full open to the view, having Mount Meru for its seed core, and Saya Peak for its filament. The sun resumes its course in the maze of the sky like a lion and destroys the dark, thick darkness with its rays, just as a lion kills a huge elephant with his beaming nails. See again the moving moon shining with her bright beams, resembling the white filaments of flowers and anointing the faces of the ethereal goddesses with sweet ambrosial light borne by the air and breezes of heaven. Again, the holy tree of heaven sheds its heaps of flowers on the deserts of notorious men as rewards for their virtuous acts. Behold again the flight of time, riding like an eagle on its two wings of acts and actions, and passing with the noise of pat-pat over the vast maze of creation. See another Indra appearing after the bygone lords of gods have passed away, and taking his seat on the lotus-like throne of heaven, like a contemptible bee. Again, the wicked age of Kali appears to soil the holy Satya Yuga, like the black body of Narayana fills the clear waters of the deep, or like a blast of wind sweeps the dust of the earth on its transparent surface. Time forms the plate of the earth like a potter, turning his wheel constantly to bring on the revolutions of his creations in successive kalpas. Veteran time, skilled in the work of renovation, withers away the freshness of creation, just like the autumn winds blast the foliage of a forest in order to produce them again. The 24 zodiacal suns, rising at once and burning creation, leaves dead bodies all around like wild white bones scattered in a country. Again, Pushkara and Avartaka clouds pour down their rainwater, deluging the tops of the boundary mountains and filling the face of the earth with foaming bubbles swimming on the surface of one sheet of water. After the waters have subsided and the winds have ceased to blow, the world appears as a vast vacuum, void of all being. Again, we see living beings filling the earth and feeding for some years upon the moisture of its vegetation, leaving their decayed bodies and being mixed up with their souls in the universal spirit. Again, at other times, the divine mind stretches out other creations, and these are drawn like pictures of fairylands on the canvas of vacuum. Again, creatures appear to view, and again it is submerged in the waters of the flood, both of which follow one another like the axles of a wheel. Now, Ram, consider whether there is any stability of anything in this revolutionary world, other than it being a maze of continuous delusions. The revolutions of the world resembles the hallucination of the Sura's mind, It is a fantasy without any solidity in it. The world appearing so extensive and thickly peopled is only a fancied unreality, like the false appearance of two moons in the sky. Though appearing as real by our ignorance of its nature, it is made of unreality and is not worth reliance. So Vasishtha has told us in no uncertain terms that pure consciousness, the silent witness, is a field of all possibilities. And all possibilities are constantly manifesting from this incredible, eternal, unbounded void. We see the world and we have a lexicon of ideas about how the yugas form and how the world is created and dissolved. But all that is just a story of how an illusion appears and is dissolved. There's no substance to it. All the works of the Vedas, thousands and thousands of syllables and sutras, hundreds and hundreds of stories and ideas are presented, and all of these are just stories of an illusion. Only one thing is real. Only one thing is eternal. That is pure consciousness. So why do we have all these stories? Why do we read the Yoga Vasishtha? Why do we study the Vedic literature? It is to connect with the illusory ego and attempt to dismantle the illusion by revealing it. It's like walking backstage of a magic show and seeing how the tricks are performed. Once we see how the tricks are performed, then if we take our seat in the audience, we're no longer amazed. We know clearly how the rabbit is coming from the hat and how the lady is being sawed into two pieces. We're never fooled again. And once this break occurs, once we realize, okay, this is all illusion, it loses its value. What value is there in something that is unsubstantial and ethereal? The ego places great value on possessions, automobiles, houses, the physical body. How does it look in the mirror? Is it beautiful? Is it getting older? Ego is very concerned and grasping of all the illusory objects. But one day we realize even the ego is an illusion. So we lose the importance of the material world. That makes it easier to let go of it. And in the letting go, we find the silent witness is all that remains. Chapter 48, the story of Dasura. He receives Agni's boon to live Trita. Vasishtha continued, all worldly men who are engaged in various activities and who are perverted in their understanding with desires of wealth and enjoyment can never learn the truth until they get rid of their worldliness. Only he who has cultivated his understanding and subdued his sensual organs can perceive the errors of the world, as he knows a bell fruit held in his hand. Any rational being who properly sees the errors of the world will forsake his delusion of egoism, like a snake casts off its skin. Thus, being unaware of his selfishness, he has no more to be born. He is like a fried grain that can never germinate, though it be sown in the field and lie there forever. It is pitiful that ignorant men take so much pains for the preservation of their bodies, which are ever subject to disease and dangers, and are liable to perish today or tomorrow, all at the expense of their soul. Therefore, Ram, do not take so much care for the dull body like the ignorant, but regard only for the welfare of your soul. Ram said, tell me, sage, the story of Dasura, which illustrates the visionary and air-drawn form of this rotating universe, all hollow within. Vasishtha replied, hear me repeat to you, O Ram, the story of Dasura. It is an illustration of the delusive form of the world, which is no more than a built in the air utopia of our brains. On the surface of this land, there is the great and wealthy province of Magadha, which is full of flower trees of all kinds. There's a forest of wide extending Kadamba groves, which was the pleasant playground of charming birds of various sorts and colors. Here, the wide fields are full of corns and grains. The edges of the land were filled with groves and trees, and stream banks were filled with blooming lotuses and water lilies. The groves resounded with the melodious strains of country girls and the plains were filled with blades of blossoms, bedewed by the mighty nightly frost, and appearing as arrows of the gods of love. Here at the foot of a mountain, decked with Karnikara flowers, and beset by rows of plantain plants and kadamba trees, was a secluded spot overgrown with moss and shrubs. It was sprinkled over with the reddish dust of crimson flowers, carried by the winds, and was resonant to the warbling of waterfowl, singing in unison with the melodious strains of aquatic cranes. On a sacred hill overhanging that spot, there rose a kadamba tree, crowded by birds of various kinds. There, on it, dwelt a holy sage of great austerity. He was known by the name of Dasura. He was engaged in austere penance. Sitting on a branch of his kadamba tree, with his exalted soul devoid of passions, Ram said, "I want to know, O sage, from where and how did that hermit come to dwell in that forest? And why was he sitting on that tall kadamba tree?" Shishta replied, his father was the renowned sage Sharaloma, who lived on the same mountains and resembled the great Brahma in his abstract meditation. Like Kacha, the only child of Brihaspati, the preceptor of the gods, Dasura was the only son of Sauraloma. From his boyhood, he and his father came to dwell in the forest. Sharaloma lived many years in this way, until he left his mortal frame for his heavenly abode. As a bird quits its nest to fly into the air, Dasura, being left alone in that lonely forest, wept bitterly and lamented over the loss of his father, with wailings as loud as the shrieks of a heron upon the separation from its mate. Being deprived of both his parents, he was full of sorrow and grief in his mind. He began to fade away like the lotus blossom in winter. He was seen in this sad plight by the woodland god of that forest, who, taking compassion on the forlorn youth, approached him unseen and said in an audible voice, "O sagely son of the sage, why do you weep like the ignorant? Why are you so dejected? knowing the instability of worldly things. Now continuing, established in the silent witness. Begin the Trimana Sanyama process on the esoteric Mahamatra and balance all karmic traces that have arisen and have been active from this reading of the Yoga Vasishtha. Jay Gurudev.